Good afternoon. It's a bit of a delayed reaction. That was like contacting the US on one of those TV programs. Hello there. Great, good. Jonathan, I bumped into Jonathan on the way in, and he said to me, "Oh, I just realised we got you to do the quiz on Friday and preach on Sunday. Isn't that hard for you?" And I just sat there. I thought, no, it's much harder for the people who've got to sit and listen to me. So here goes, and we'll crack on with one eye on the clock. So if we could get the first video or photo nasty up. I don't know how well you can see that, but that is me struggling across the finish line at last year's Worcester 10K race. Yeah, many of you, I know there are runners here, Moz mentioned earlier, and so the runners here will know what a PB is, being a personal best. That was my PW. Those of you who were at the quiz on Friday, that was my I was going for the Jelly Babies prize. I did get along this year. They didn't take any photos of me, presumably I just looked too awful for photos, but I did get it back. So anyway, I want to tell you about another 10-kilometre race. And this took place 30 years ago. There were 128 runners for the cross-country race in the US 1993 NCAA Division II Track and Field Championships. Big race, very important, 10K race. And as they set out on this cross-country run, they went on a course that the marshals had set out for them, and off they went. And toward the end of the course, one of the runners in the middle of the group realised that something was wrong. Mike Del Cavo of Western State College in Colorado saw that everybody ahead of him had missed the turn. And he was waving to them saying, waving for them to follow me, and I was yelling for them to follow me, this is the right race. Del Cavo was right. And there was him and 4 other runners who followed him. The rest continued on the shortcut. It wasn't 10K. It allowed them to run a shorter distance and finish the race. And guess what? Guess what happened? Guess where Mike Del Cavo came? That's right, he came 123rd. Because they said, oh no, we're going to allow everybody else who didn't run 10K and who didn't do the run on the track, we're going to allow them to be the people who finish first and all. Asked what his competitors thought of his mid-race decision not to follow the crowd, Del Cavo responded, they thought it was funny that I went the right way. Del Cavo was the one who ran correctly. In the same way, our goal is to run correctly. Our goal as Christians is to finish the race marked out for us by Christ. We can rejoice with those who have the courage to follow God, ignoring the cheering of the crowd. And as Paul said in 2 Timothy chapter 4, 7-8, in that very well-known phrase, I've fought the good fight, I have finished the race, I have kept the faith. Now there is in store for me the crown of righteousness. And today in our Sermon on the Mount series, that's what we've got to. We're talking about righteousness. We're going to focus on a passage from Matthew chapter 5, 17-48. And what I want to look at is, what is righteousness? Why is it so important? And what does it mean for us in our lives? What is righteousness? Why is it so important? And what does it mean for us in our lives? And we'll look at the passage in a few moments. You'll remember in the Beatitudes, one of them says, blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be satisfied. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be satisfied. Now, there's a difference between right and righteousness when we think about what is righteousness. Right, correct as a fact. Righteousness, the quality of being morally right or justifiable, of being right in the eyes of God. Let me try to put it another way. How many people here have a smartwatch? Anyone else? Yeah, well, there's a few people. Got these fabulous smartwatches. This is mine. I'm only wearing it. It's actually stopped working. The face stopped working the other week, but it was still transmitting to my phone, so I still wore it even though I couldn't see anything. And now it's completely given up hope. And as all middle-aged people do, I'm getting one of my kids to find the right smartwatch for me to buy next. Anyway, I was in this very room recently thinking about right and righteousness, and I overheard a conversation about smartwatches between two people. And the two people were comparing which smartwatches they had, and what was good about them and what they didn't like so much. The thing about a smartwatch, for those of you who don't have one, is it'll know how many steps you've taken towards your daily target. It'll tell your heart rate if it's a really smart smartwatch. It'll tell you how much you've slept, and when you exercise, it'll be your times per kilometre. When you go for a run, it'll tell you when you need to stand up and have a stretch. And it even tells you the time too. And whatever you may think, your smartwatch is always right. So I listened to this conversation between two people, and one of them said, I was sat in a meeting, in a big important meeting at work, and my smartwatch said to me, you need to stand up and have a stretch right now. Which of course would be the weirdest thing to do. So thank you, Claire and Therese, for that conversation. Righteousness is about far more than following the rules. That's what makes it challenging for us as Christians. And more about that in a moment. Right, why is righteousness so important? We don't talk about it a heck of a lot, but why is it important to us as Christians? You thought I'd asked all my questions on Friday. I've got one more to ask everybody. So if you're able, I'd like you to stand up, and I'm going to ask one question, which I expect. So stand up if you're able to. So I'm going to ask how many times the word righteousness appears in the Bible. Didn't give any clues on Friday. I'll give you a clue today. It's a lot. And I'm going to start at 100, and I'm going to count up in hundreds. Okay? And when you think, if you think it's 100, sit down when I say 100. Clear? So, how many times is righteousness in the Bible? 100. Because it would never be the first one, would it? 200. 300. 400. 500. Well, very well done to all the people who just sat down. Everybody can sit down now. It is 500 times. So William Tyndale, who translated the Bible into English hundreds of years ago, remodeled the word after rightwis, which would appear to be right wise or right ways. And this word appears 500 times in the Bible. So this is an important recurring theme, but for the mathematicians here like me, 200 in the New Testament, 300 in the Old, nicely balanced, doesn't appear or disappear. It's a consistent theme. What tells us righteousness is a vital part of being a Christian. So let's look at the passage to and some more about that. So Jonathan, if you could read Matthew 5:48.
The fulfilment of the law. Do not think, this is Jesus speaking, do not think that I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. I've not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them. Truly, I tell you, until heaven and earth disappear, not the smallest letter, not the stroke of a pen will by any means disappear from the law until everything is accomplished. Therefore, anyone who sets aside one of the least of these commandments and teaches others accordingly will be called least in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever practices and teaches these commands will be called great in the kingdom of heaven. For I tell you that unless your righteousness surpasses that of the Pharisees and the teachers of the law, you will certainly not enter the kingdom of heaven. You've heard it said, but it was said to the people long ago, you shall not murder, and anyone who murders will be subject to judgment. But I tell you, that anyone who is angry with a brother or sister will be subject to judgment. Again, anyone who says to a brother or sister, Raka, is answerable to the court, and anyone who says, you fool, will be in danger of the fire of hell. Therefore, if you are offering your gift at the altar and there remember that your brother or sister has something against you, leave your gift in front of the altar. First go and reconcile to them, and then come and offer your gift. Settle matters quickly with your adversary who is taking you to court. Do it while you are still together on the way, or your adversary may hand you over to the judge, and the judge may hand you over to the officer, and you may be thrown in prison. Truly I tell you, you will not get out until you have paid the last penny. You have heard that it was said, you shall not commit adultery. But I tell you that anyone who looks at a woman lustfully has already committed adultery with her in his heart. If your right eye causes you to stumble, gouge it out and throw it away. It's better for you to lose one part of your body than for your whole body to be thrown into hell. And if your right hand causes you to stumble, cut it off and throw it away. It is better for you to lose one part of your body than for your whole body to go into hell. It has been said, anyone who divorces his wife must give her a certificate of divorce. But I tell you that anyone who divorces his wife, except for sexual immorality, makes her the victim of adultery. And anyone who marries a divorced woman commits adultery. Again, you have heard it said to the people long ago, do not break your oath, but fulfill to the Lord the vows you have made. But I tell you, do not swear on oath at all, either by heaven, for it is God's throne, or by the earth, for it is his footstool, or by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great King. And do not swear by your head, for you cannot make even one hair white or black. All you need to say is simply yes or no. Anything beyond this comes from the devil. You have heard that it was said, eye for eye and tooth for tooth. But I tell you, do not resist an evil person. If anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to them the other cheek also. And if anyone wants to sue you and take your shirt, hand over your coat as well. If anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go with them 2 miles. Give to the one who asks you, and do not turn away from the one who wants to borrow from you. You have heard that it was said, love your neighbour and hate your enemy. But I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, that you may be children of your Father in heaven. He causes his sun to rise on the evil and the good, and sends rain on the righteous and the unrighteous. If you love those who love you, what reward will you get? Are not even the tax collectors doing that? And if you greet only your own people, what are you doing more than others? Do not even pagans do that? Be perfect, therefore, as your heavenly Father is perfect.
Thank you. So a lot to take in there. And Jesus starts off by saying very clearly that he's not come to challenge the law or the prophets. He's not looking to react against the establishment. However, what he then goes on to say is pretty challenging, to say the least. In short, he says that sticking to the rules is not enough. He talks about murder, adultery, divorce, promises, revenge, and love. It sounds like a recipe for a tabloid newspaper. Jesus teaches the people both then and he teaches us now that following the rules is simply not enough. In this way, whilst he's not challenging the establishment, Jesus has a message that is, in essence, revolutionary. Let's think a bit about that time. I did a bit of reading up on this. The Romans had taken over what was Israel and Judea in 3 BC, and they renamed it Palestine. And Herod in charge, and he wasn't a Jew, so no credibility in the eyes of the Jewish people. Plus, he had no real power, and that still stayed with the Romans. There were some big differences between the Romans and the Jews. The Romans believed in many gods, whereas the Jews believed in one God. It allowed the Jews to carry on practicing their religion as long as it didn't threaten their empire. In short, it was an uneasy peace. It was a real tension. Many of you were here, talked about the sermon on them, and we all split into groups, and imagined ourselves as those different characters and how we would be responding to the Sermon on the Mount. And what it highlighted was that while these groups had some similarities, they also had widely differing hopes and reactions to hearing Jesus. Last week, Reese talked about salt and light and how as Christians we're called to be different and distinct from the rest of the world. Reese talked about us and other people and how we are committing to act as Christians in the world. Today, I want to focus on us and God. And what are we committing to be in our relationships with God? Righteousness is based on God's standard, not those of the world. And it's about our relationship with God. I mean, generally speaking, righteousness seems to have a bad reputation about these days. If we talk about somebody being self-righteous, it's hardly a compliment. However, the righteousness that the Bible talks about and that Jesus talks about is totally different. This is about a pathway between us as people and God. It's about a route that takes us from the challenge and the difficulty and the generally imperfect nature of our daily life to the perfection of God's kingdom. Sometimes when we're on a journey, we have a great sense of where we're going, how we're going to get there and when we're going to arrive. Other days, we may feel like we're stuck in the middle of a traffic jam. When the Bible talks about righteousness, I don't think it's simply talking about us as Christians becoming more holy. It's about our relationship with God and how that's going. It was great that we started off thinking about, where are you going this week? That can be a physical thing, and it's also a spiritual thing. Think for a moment. How's your relationship with God right now? Is it better or worse than it was a few months ago? What would help to improve that relationship? More time in prayer? Better understanding of the Bible? More time spent with other Christians, understanding our faith? I think that the course that we're doing is a great step and really to be commended and for people to take part in, because those are the sorts of things that will help us all. Those are the things that help us in a search for righteousness. And notice when we think about these things that will improve our relationship with God, none of them refer to any biblical laws or rules. Jesus says, unless in verse 20, unless your righteousness surpasses that of the Pharisees and the teachers of the law, you will certainly not enter the kingdom of heaven. Now, the Pharisees and the teachers of the law, they knew all about the rules and what must be followed. They were the smartwatches. They knew all about being right. What Jesus starts to talk about, without challenging the law, because that would have got him into big trouble, is about righteousness, about seeking the right relationship with God. What he is saying is game-changing. Jesus tells us that to become more righteous involves far more than simply keeping the law. It's about being more open to God in our lives and about seeking his will. You may be listening to this thinking like when I read it, what can I do? I'm not starting from a place here. Let me reassure you, nowhere in this passage or in the Gospels does Jesus say, if I were you, I wouldn't bother. God's will is for all. Equally, whatever we may have done in the past does not matter. Finding a better path to righteousness is about the present and the future. Also, the book of Romans makes it clear that people cannot be made righteous before God by following the law, but Jesus died to pay the penalty of sin and separation from God. When we trust in Christ, God sees us through Christ and declares us to be righteous or justified. God made him who had no sin to be sin for us, so that in him we might become the righteousness of God. That's 2 Corinthians 5:21. And also 1 Peter 2:24. He himself bore our sins in his body on the tree so that we might die to sins and live for righteousness. Yeah, we sang earlier, I couldn't earn it, I don't deserve it, still you give yourself away. And that's the God, that's the Saviour we follow. In the way of righteousness, as it says in Proverbs 12:28, loads of righteousness comments in the Bible. In the way of righteousness, there is life. Along that path, there is immortality. The way of righteousness leads to life, not death, because God is the ultimate source of life. It means that righteousness belongs to God alone. Therefore, as we pursue God, we will indeed find his righteousness. Pursuing God's righteousness means putting him at the centre of our lives. And here is the truth. God takes pleasure in those who pursue righteousness. So going back to that beatitude, thinking about blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. What do you hunger and thirst for, and what will you choose? If you take nothing else away from today, as I have when preparing this talk, I think it's this. When Jesus made these comments, when he said this, he is talking about righteousness as a door to a closer relationship with God. He's not necessarily talking about righting the wrongs of this world and bringing justice. However, as we become more righteous, more in tune with God, then as a consequence of that, we are far more likely to address the wrongs of this world. What Jesus is telling us to do is to pursue that righteousness, that closer walk with God in our daily lives. This is like in that 10k race that Del Cavo ran. It's a road less travelled, but you and I do not travel alone. The Beatitudes are about linking earth and heaven. As we hunger and thirst for righteousness, our vision of God and of heaven will become stronger. So just think for a moment. What are the things that you long for in your life? Where does your relationship with God feature in these? Where are you going? Another quote. It is our choices that show what we truly are far more than our abilities. I don't know if anybody knows who said that. When the Archbishop of Canterbury preached it on Christmas Day to the royal family, only the Queen recognised that it was Albus Dumbledore who said that in the Harry Potter book. But I think there's a lot of truth in it. And in terms of righteousness, it definitely rings true. You know, Rees spoke about Christian influence, about our saltiness and how we need to be different. And when I listened to that, I thought, right, how am I going to be in relation to other people this week? And then this week, looking at righteousness, I think the question is, for us, what are you choosing for your relationship with God? What are the choices you're making? It would be all too easy for us to look at our lives and question them and ask how righteous I've been this week. And I don't know about you or me, but about you rather, I'd probably be giving myself a 3 or 4 out of 10 if we were giving marks. However, the question is not about how righteous we've been, it's about our relationship with God. Which route are we choosing for today and tomorrow? Not the one we've been on the past. Back to one final story, if you'll allow. I didn't do much exercise in the first half of this year, so I wasn't in great shape. And I finally got back in about June to doing park run after Julia gave us some encouragement and said, we're going to have a healthy June. So for those of you who don't know, park run is a fantastic thing. It's a free 5k run every Saturday at 9 o'clock, and you get sent your time and an email shortly afterwards. My email in June didn't make for very good reading, but I knew that already, because the first couple of weeks I went back, I started off and on my run, going along at my steady pace. And you know these speed walkers? There's a man doing speed walking straight past me and never saw him again. twice. Now listen, the point of saying that is, it doesn't matter whether you're me jogging along, I'm a little bit faster now, or whether you're speed walking, or whether you're at the front getting new PBs. What matters is to keep going. What matters is to choose that path and to keep on your path and to choose the right path. Choose your route wisely and remember that the way of righteousness leads to life, not death.